Welcome to the video. Today I am going to be giving some romance recommendations in honor of the Valentine's Day season. Is it a season? Hallmark would love you to believe so, but who knows? Today, the recommendations that I'm going to be giving are going to be separated into three categories. The first category is traditional romance. These are just romantic books about adorable couples falling in love, and it's all wonderful. Exactly what you would expect from a romance. The second category are romance books that are advertised or marketed as romance books, but they don't really fulfill that romantic quota. It's more in the vein of women's fiction, and sometimes there's a cute boy. These are still books that I would recommend. If you want to get like a happily ever after vibe, these won't be the ones for you. These are more character growth stories rather than adorable falling in love smooches, all that good stuff. The third category are books that are not advertised as romances, but have a great romantic element in them that I think you would really enjoy. The romance really stands out, but there's a bunch of other stuff in the story where the romance isn't the main focus, but it's still really enjoyable. And maybe if you wanted to get into more genre fiction, if you're a romance reader, these might be some good options for you. First up, we have some of my maybe favorite books ever. We have The Kiss Quotient and The Bride Test by Helen Hoang. Both of the leads in these, Stella and Kai, have autism, and there's some really interesting and like nuanced rep in these that I really enjoy, as well as being extremely steamy and not safe for work. These also have a lot of character growth, but I think the romance in them is especially good as well. They're not really fluffy romances like a lot of other books. These ones have a lot of difficult topics handled in them, and I absolutely sobbed in both of them. I think especially The Bride Test, but like both of them were rough in the best way. Let's do all of the physical books that I own first. I have You Deserve Each Other by Sarah Hogle. This reads like a rom-com movie. It feels almost like a screenplay, like almost like it's set up that way as opposed to a traditional novel, but it's absolutely hilarious, and the romance in here is really interesting. It's about a couple who both want to get out of their engagement, but they don't want to be the one to call it off, so they're like playing chicken and trying to convince the other one to break up with them. And it's hilarious and heartwarming, and I love it. Next up, we have You Know What, You Love It, Red, White, and Royal Blue by Casey McQuiston. This is a romance between the son of the President of the United States and the Prince of England, and it's adorable. This one, I know a lot of people had a problem with the couple, and I sort of did too. I don't think their romance was the best fleshed out, but I thought the banter in this and the humor was really top notch. Next up, I have In a Holidaze by Christina Lauren. This is my favorite Christina Lauren that I have read so far. Not that I'm trying to read all of them. I have also read The Unhoneymooners, which I actively disliked, and The Honey Don't List, which I actually did really like, but this one definitely blows both of those out of the water, especially in regards to the romance. I really bought the romance in here. I thought it was really fun. I thought, what's his name? I thought Andrew was an excellent love interest. I was really into him. If you're gonna pick up a Christina Lauren, this would be the one that I would recommend. For books that I don't own, we have One Day in December by Josie Silver. This is another Christmas romance. Do I like Christmas romances? Am I learning about myself? This is about a couple who have a near miss or a near close. They meet each other, but then like don't see each other again for a number of years, and then they keep coming in and out of each other's lives, and it's so good. This was one of my favorite books of the year that I read it. I highly recommend. Next, we have The Flatshare by Beth O'Leary. It's got two people who share an apartment. One works days, one works nights, so they live in the apartment while the other one is at work, and then start to learn about each other through notes that they leave around the house, and it's very cute and a good slow burn, and I thought it was really good. Next up, we have Something to Talk About by Meryl Wilsner. Did I get that right? Meryl Wilsner. This is a sapphic romance about a Hollywood producer and screenwriter and her assistant, and it's really interesting. It explores a lot of the aspects of Hollywood and being a woman in the industry, and their romance is really precious. I really enjoyed this one. I feel like I say I highly recommend all of these, but like I do, but especially Something to Talk About I thought was really different from anything else that I had read. Next we have the grand masters of the romance genre right now, Get a Life, Chloe Brown, and Take a Hint, Dani Brown by Talia Hibbert. These have taken the internet by storm, and with good reason. They are really excellent romances, very different from each other. They're both very romantic books, and the romantic leads in both of them are so fun. The chemistry between everyone is so good. I want to pick a favorite. I know my favorite in the moment reading it was Dani Brown. I preferred Dani Brown, but I feel like there were so many aspects of Chloe Brown that I really loved, and especially the love interest in that one, Red, people are just wild over. But both of them are really good. The third book in this series, Act Your Age, Eve Brown, that one's coming out I believe this summer, so very excited for that one. The final book that I have on the Romance for Romance list is You Had Me at Hola by Alexis Daria. This is a romance between two telenovela stars as they start up a new show together, and the show and their personal lives kind of start to intermingle. This one I thought was exceptionally well written. This felt kind of like it transcended the romance genre in some ways. I thought it was so well done. This one was also very steamy, so know that going into it. But I really enjoyed this one, and I want to pick up more Alexis Daria in the future. This next category I am calling Romance for Character Growth. These are books that are traditionally categorized under the romance genre, but maybe don't have the happily ever after that you're looking for. Or a lot of these are really dark. I know a lot of them focus on grief, I've noticed. The first one for this category is In 5 Years by Rebecca Searle. This is about a woman who has a dream that she wakes up one day with a man beside her, and it feels like a premonition, and then she wakes up again and realizes that that guy is her best friend's new boyfriend, and drama ensues, but not fun drama. This one is one of the ones that focuses a lot on grief. Next up we have Star-Crossed by Minnie Darke. This is a story about a woman who writes horoscopes for the local paper, and she knows that this boy that she likes loves reading them and like puts a lot of faith in them, so she starts trying to manipulate it to get what she wants, which is him. But I thought what was so interesting about this book was the way that her horoscopes affected the lives of other people. There are intermittent chapters in here, so it'll be the girl's perspective and then the boy's perspective, and then an intermediate chapter where they talk about other random people who have been affected, and I found that the most enjoyable aspect of the book, and really interesting the way that everyone in this story eventually crosses paths in some way. I enjoyed this one a lot more than I would have thought. The romance, but the writing and the story and the characters were all really good. Next up, we have One to Watch by Kate Stayman-London. This is a Bachelor ripoff. It's about a show called The Main Squeeze, which decides for the first time in its history that they're going to have a plus-size woman as the lead. Her name is Bea, and it follows her through the pre-production and filming and fallout of being on this show. I know that The Bachelor is a romance show, but it's just a cat. The Bachelor is focused on romance a lot of the time, but it's also focused on a lot of drama. And this one especially, I think, focuses more on Bea and her journey of self-discovery and acceptance, more so than focusing on any specific relationship with the boys. Especially in a romantic way, like in such a short amount of time, you don't really get emotionally invested in these people. You get invested in the people, but you don't get invested in them as a couple as much. But I still really enjoyed this one. Next up, I felt obligated to mention this one just because I ended up enjoying it when I wasn't sure that I would. And that is Midnight Sun by Stephanie Meyer. I was exactly the right age when Twilight came out. I'm basically genetically engineered to love it, and I was worried that it wouldn't hold up. And it definitely doesn't hold up in quite the same way, but it was still actually really enjoyable. I thought that there was a lot of interesting stuff, especially about the Cullen family in it. I am putting this one under romance for character growth because I don't think it's a very good romance. I don't think their relationship really makes much sense, especially from this side. I feel like their relationship actually makes even less sense now, but I do not regret grading it. I regret it being like 650 pages, but I am glad that I did it. I'm glad that I can say that I did it. Next up, if you watched my favorite books of 2020, this will be familiar to you. Anna K, A Love Story by Jenny Lee. This is a Korean-American YA retelling of Anna Karenina, and that just sounds like everything I need, and it's so good. This one is really focused on the ensemble cast, so I feel like there is less of a focus on the romance between Anna and Vronsky, but there are like mini romances in between, but that's not why I read it. Like, it's subtitled A Love Story, which I think is interesting because the romance isn't really what I took from it. I took the friendship dynamics a lot more from this. If you're interested in tangentially knowing about classics without having to slog through them, I think this is a really good compromise. Read this, read the Wikipedia page, you'll be all caught up. And of course, I have to mention The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by Taylor Jenkins Reid. I was trying to think, actually, I don't know if this is classified as a romance or more as historical fiction. It's implied that there's a good amount of romance in here, but it's definitely more focused on Evelyn Hugo rather than the relationships that she's forming. It's following her life over like 60 years and seeing how she changes and how the world around her changes and how she can influence it. And it's beautifully written and heartbreaking and so much fun. The romance in here, I'll be honest, I didn't really care for, but I appreciated what it was trying to do. And I loved that Evelyn was happy. Even if I was like, this romance is dumb, she was happy, so I'm happy for her. Next up, we have The Invisible Life of Addie Larue by V.E. Schwab. This one is another one that I don't actually know if this is categorized as romance or historical fiction, but I know in the promotion of it, a lot of people were talking about how it's a romance between a French girl and the devil over 300 years. Yes and no, that's not the part to focus on. It's really the character growth and seeing Addie live through 300 years of history and how her life is affected. Everyone's talked this book to death. It's really good. If it interests you, I would recommend checking it out. It is very slow. There's at least a bit of a romance that I think can propel you through the story more quickly than if it was just straight historical fiction. Next up, we have Evvie Drake Starts Over by Linda Holmes. This is a story about a woman whose husband has recently passed, and she is renting out a room to a friend of a friend who is temporarily escaping his circumstances after his job kind of fell apart. Hello? Oh no. Are you okay? Someone got himself stuck on the curtain. Yeah, you won't do that again, will you? Are you okay? He's fine. Evvie Drake is about this woman coming to terms with her circumstances and her relationship with her late husband, as well as a bit of a romance with this new guy in town. This one I think especially was really good about the character growth on both hero and heroine's sides. They felt really balanced, and the romance was fine. I just didn't really care for it. I more cared for Evvie learning about herself. The final book that I have in this section is Beach Read by Emily Henry. This one is a lie. It looks like it's going to be a romance, and then it's not a romance even a little bit. There's some smooching in it, but this one is really dark and not a fun rom-com like I wanted. This one's fine. I just didn't really enjoy it. I don't think it was what I signed up for. So maybe if you know going into it that the romance is like eh, and also it's like dark, maybe you'll have a better time than I did. Final category, we're getting there. These are genre books that are not advertised as romances but still have a really special romantic element in them. The first one that I want to mention is American Royals by Catherine McGee. This is a story about America if they had a monarchy still, and it follows the new princess. This is categorized as a YA contemporary, but I thought there was some really good romances in here, some really interesting love triangles, and also a bodyguard romance, which I absolutely loved. I thought this one was so good and a bit more sophisticated of a YA novel. Next up, I want to mention Dark Matter by Blake Crouch. This is a sci-fi thriller about a man who is sucked through multiple dimensions and timelines. He's basically stolen away from his life and his wife and his son, and he's trying desperately to get back to them. And it's really well done. The romance in this especially, you wouldn't expect from such a high action thriller, but their relationship somehow persists between dimensions and timelines, and they always end up coming back to each other. If you are looking to get into something really genre fiction-y, this might be a good jumping off point. Next up, I want to mention the book of the moment. It is The House in the Cerulean Sea by TJ Klune. This is a fantasy. It's like a contemporary fantasy novel about a magical orphanage. And there is a bit of a romance in here. The romance is good. It's not my favorite romance ever, but I do think it really added something to the plot. And everything else about this book is just so incredible that, like, this is really just an excuse for me to talk about House in the Cerulean Sea again. So if you haven't read it, what are you doing? Come on, get on it. Next up, yes, you're very hungry, I know. Yes, so sad. Next up, I want to mention When No One Is Watching by Alyssa Cole. And Alyssa Cole is a well-known romance author, and this is her debut in the thriller genre, and there is also a pretty strong romance element in here. This wasn't a romance that I especially loved, but you could really tell that she excels in writing romance, and so I think this would be another really good transition. Like, if you've already read Alyssa Cole, just read more Alyssa Cole. And someone feed this boy. He's wasting away, starving, aren't you? You gonna be okay? You gonna not get your claw stuck in the curtain again? The final book that I want to mention is The One by John Mars. This is a story about a future where you can be genetically matched with your romantic partner. So there is some interesting romance dynamics at play, some interesting and unlikely couples are formed, but this is a thriller at the end of the day. The story is told from 5 POVs, and so each one of those couples has something a little bit different about them. Some are more romantic than others, some are more platonic, some are dead. It's really interesting and a really unique way of flipping the romance genre in a way. And that's it. Those are all of the romances that I have to recommend today. I hope you found a recommendation out of this or something that piqued your interest into getting more into romance. I find romances are really good for me. They're one of my go-to genres, especially for getting out of a slump, because most of the time, they're really fun and fast-paced and easy reading. And sometimes that's what you want. That is all for me. I hope you enjoyed, and happy Valentine's Day. Bye.